Welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about Milton Hershey. As you can tell by his last name, he was the one who founded the largest chocolate company in the world. He was born on September 13th, 1857 in Derry Township, Pennsylvania. Entrepreneur Milton Snavely Hershey was the only child of his parents. Born on a farm outside of Derry Church, Pennsylvania, Hershey spent the early years of his childhood trailing his father, a dreamer who always had his eye out for the next big opportunity. By 1867, Hershey's father had largely cut himself out of the family picture after he got divorced, with Hershey's upbringing left to his mother. The strict mother instilled in her son an appreciation for hard work. At the age of 14, Hershey, who dropped out of school the year before, expressed an interest in candy making and began cooperating with a master confectioner in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. 4 years later, Hershey borrowed $150 from his aunt and set up his candy shop in the heart of Philadelphia. For 5 long years, Hershey poured his sweat and time into the business, but success eluded him. Finally, he closed shop and headed west, reunited with his father in Denver, where he found work with a confectioner. It was there that he discovered caramel and how fresh milk could be used to make it. But the entrepreneur in Hershey wasn't content to work for someone else, and he struck out on his own again, first in Chicago and then later in New York City. In both cases, Hershey failed. In 1883, he returned to Lancaster and, still convinced he could build a successful candy company, started in Lancaster Caramel Company. Success soon followed. Within a few short years, Hershey had thriving business and was shipping his caramel all over the country. At the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893, Hershey got an up-close look at the art of chocolate making. He was immediately hooked. While his caramel business boomed, Hershey started the Hershey Chocolate Company. His fascination quickly became focused on milk chocolate, considered a delicacy and largely the domain of the Swiss. Hershey was determined to find a new formula that would allow him to mass produce and mass distribute milk chocolate candy. In 1900, he sold the Lancaster Caramel Company for an astonishing $1 million. 3 years later, he began building a mammoth and modern candy making facility in Derry Church. It opened in 1905, setting a new course for Hershey and the candy industry. Milton Hershey was almost on the Titanic during its fateful final voyage, even putting down $300 deposit for the crossing. But a business emergency made him change his travel plans at the last minute. Quickly, the Hershey Chocolate Company's success far exceeded that of its founder's previous venture. His winning ideas included the Hershey Kiss 1907, which the company's founder named himself. The trademark foil wrapper was added in 1924 as the company grew and Hershey's wealth expanded. So did his vision for creating a model community in his home region, in the town that became known as Hershey, Pennsylvania. Hershey built schools, parks, churches, recreational facilities, and housing for his employees. He even added a trolley system for his workers. At his side for much of his philanthropy was his wife, Catherine, whom he married in 1898. Unable to have children of their own, the Hersheys focused on a good portion of giving their endeavors that affected kids. In 1909, the couple opened the Hershey Industrial School, a facility for orphan boys. It has since become a landing spot for girls as well, and is now known as Milton Hershey School. In 1918, 3 years after Catherine's unexpected death, Hershey transferred much of his wealth, including his ownership stake in the Hershey Chocolate Company, to the Hershey Trust, which funds the Hershey School. Hershey's philanthropy continued even when the economy struggled and he was nearing the end of his life. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, Hershey ignited a building mini-boom in his town to keep men working. He ordered the construction of a large hotel, a community building, and new offices for the Hershey Company. During World War II, Hershey backed the country's military efforts by supplying forces with chocolate bars called Ration D Bar and a better-tasting tropical chocolate bar. To those who knew Hershey, His generosity wasn't surprising. Shy and reserved, Hershey had a quiet demeanor that contrasted greatly with that of many of America's other business titans. While he seldom wrote or read, he had been forced to leave school early. Hershey was driven to make sure those around him received a solid education. His display of wealth was rather modest, if not downright thrifty. His house in the community he'd helped create meant everything to him. Following his wife Catherine's death, Hershey never remarried, and supposedly carried a picture of his late wife whenever he traveled. In keeping his work ethic his mother instilled to him, Hershey continued to work well in his 80s. He died in Hershey, Pennsylvania on October 13th, 1945. His legacy as a businessman and philanthropist continues to this day. The Hershey Chocolate Company has endured as one of the world's greatest candy makers, with brands that include Almond Joy, Mounds, Cadbury, Reese's, and Twizzlers. Just as impressive, the Milton Hershey School now serves about 1,900 students each year, while the M.S. Hershey Foundation, established in 1935, funds educational and cultural activities for Hershey residents. That's all for this video. I'll see you next time.